So I want to look at another logical pitfall, something that just comes up all the time and tends to be particularly tricky, and that's negating statements, especially statements, how negation relates with and or, and the quantifiers. So first thing is we're going to take a statement that involves or a couple times, and we're going to negate it. So I've got it written out in a fairly awkward way, but I think a way that's really useful. I've got it is not the case that, and then a kind of a positive statement. And I'm recording this right after the end of the NBA Finals, so referring to the finals where the Golden State Warriors surprisingly collapsed in the last 3 games of the finals and lost every game. So this is a true statement phrased in a little bit of an interesting way. We take the statement, the Golden State Warriors won Game 5, or won Game 6, or won Game 7, and we're saying it's not true that that happened. And what's an equivalent way to say that? Hopefully a little bit less awkward way to say that. But this is a very common thing that I tell my students. This comes up a lot in probability because that has a lot to do with logic. Take a statement, and to think about the negation, first just write the phrase, it is not the case that in front of it. And then try to think, is there a less awkward way to say exactly the same thing? So here would be one proposed way to negate that. I'm just going to negate all the statements in these individual statements and still connect them with ors. Okay, so that would be Golden State either didn't win game 5, or didn't win Game 6, or didn't win Game 7. But that's not logically equivalent. That's a much weaker statement. Okay, the fact is they didn't win any of them. It's not just that maybe they didn't win Game 5 and I don't know about 6 or 7, or they didn't win Game 6. It's not that they lost one of them, right? So this is equivalent to probably the most succinct way to say it is that they lost at least one. Okay. But we're saying that it's not true that they won Game 5 or Game 6 or Game 7. If they lost, say, Game 5 and won Game 6 and Game 7, then this statement in the brackets would be true because they did win Game 6, Game 7. Okay, so these are not logically equivalent. This is not something that's just a translation of this guy. Okay, instead, let's call it one double prime. What happens when you negate an or is it turns into an and. So it's called De Morgan's rules or De Morgan's laws for logic. And it's intuitive if you think about it carefully and you don't let your subconscious do it. Okay. So what it says really is that Golden State didn't win Game 5 and didn't win Game 6 and didn't win Game 7. Okay. Now I'm purposely saying didn't win because I wanted to keep the word won and have this idea that negation is then going in and negating each of these wins, but it's also changing the ors to ands. And of course, an alternate way of saying that is that Golden State Warriors lost Game 5 and lost Game 6 and lost Game 7. Okay. Or an even more succinct way would say they lost them all. Okay. They lost all those last 3 games. Okay. And that was the surprising thing because they were the favorites coming in and nobody's ever lost the last 3 games in a row of the finals. Okay. So not when you bring them past an or, they turn into an and vice versa. When you negate an and, it turns into an or, but I'm not going to show you all the possibilities. Okay. Now, notice that when you have more than 2 things, I noted, just didn't have room to put it. Let me put it right here. One like triple prime, Golden State lost all 3. There's that all coming in there as as an and that's not just an and of 2 things. We start thinking about it starts looking like a for every. Okay, and a way to say it would be for all of the last 3 games. Have a variable that varies over the last 3 games. It is true for every value of that variable, Golden State lost that game. And this one, the incorrect translation what looks more like an existence, that there's at least one. Okay, so let's actually go back to the original statement before we negated it. This could be phrased, the thing in brackets is, there exists some game among the last 3 games that they won. That's what we're negating. It's not true. And then that turns into a for every one of the last 3 games they lost them. So let me make that. Let me have another example. Actually, I'll break it up into 2 videos. In the next video, we'll start with an example that is explicitly about negating a for every statement.